It's The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast Paris correspondent Erin Zaleski. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
All right. Happy New Year as well to Judah Grunstein, editor-in-chief of World Politics Review. How does one find in 2017 World Politics Review?
Same as last year, at www.worldpoliticsreview.com.
All right. Dov Alfon, editor-at-large for Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz.
Hello,
Nice to see you. And Emre Demir, former editor-in-chief for Zaman France. Thanks for being with us. Happy New Year to you. The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, #World This Week. That new year was only 75 minutes old when terror struck at the Reina nightclub on the banks of the Bosphorus. A lone gunman shooting dead 39 at the upscale waterside nightclub in Istanbul before escaping in the confusion. The attack's been claimed by Islamic State militants, the attacker still at large. Now, before it happened, the State Religious Directorate had read out a message in 80,000 mosques considering the celebration of Christmas and New Year was un-Islamic. After the attack, though, the head of the same directorate cleared the air, stating that attacking a nightclub is the same as attacking a mosque, a view echoed when President Erdogan spoke a few days later.
Nobody's lifestyle is under systematic threat in Turkey. We will never allow this. We haven't allowed this since we took the helm 14 years ago. Anyone who claims otherwise must prove it with concrete examples.
Must prove it with concrete examples. Emre Demir, your reaction, were those the right words to use by the president?
Well, first of all, there are many concrete examples. The AKP government, since the beginning, is waging a war against the secular way of life in Turkey. It's no surprise, and we know it for years. Of course, we cannot, there is not a direct correlation or link between, the government's anti-New Year campaign and the terror attack, but it created certain.
Especially because the person they're searching for is not a Turkish national.
Yeah, but Turkey is divided, is polarized, and it is no secret. Of course, this maybe one of the reasons behind this terrorist attack was to target, indeed, this division within the Turkish nation, between seculars and Islamists.
And has that worked? I mean, you heard the remarks there by Erdogan saying, no, everybody's allowed to have their own lifestyle.
Well, if I had to use one word to describe the national mood in Turkey, I would say despair, not fear. People are in despair in Turkey, and they ask these questions. It has been there have been 33 terror attacks within 18 months in Turkey. So we entered the seemingly an endless, a cycle of violence in Turkey. It's not always about, the secular way of life. There are also a Kurdish group, PKK, who's attacking systematically. And we hear always the same phrases, same declarations after every terror attack in Turkey. We will take our revenge, and the government sends the warplanes to some mountains in Iraq or in Syria, and it changes nothing. But what happened yesterday was interesting. There had been also another terrorist attack in Izmir, the coastal region.
Yeah, let's just show images of that. The Reina attack, no longer the latest one, as Emre was saying. Turkey giving a hero's farewell Friday to a policeman who prevented a massacre during the country's latest attack, as 2 gunmen shot it out when they were barred from approaching the courthouse in Izmir.
Yeah, what struck me with this, the police officer became instantly a national hero in Turkey. What struck me is that he was Kurdish, and he timely intervened, and his timely intervention prevented a large-scale attack and dozens of lives. He sacrificed his life to save others. And we know that politicians will not change, but we see at least that we ask these questions: when will it end? How will it end? But we know that at least we have a resilient nation. So there are still people who can say, everyday life heroes who can say today. So it was a rare moment of national unity. I mean, around this police officer, there had been a lot of, social media campaigns, and it created a glimpse of hope in Turkey.
Dov Alfan, there's a sense that Turkey's a softer and softer target with all the attacks we've enumerated.
Yeah, and also I think we can begin to understand the Turkish people who perfectly understand that there are least and least support from the West. I mean, general people in Western Europe do not understand who is the victim, is Erdogan the good guys, please tell me. And for Turkey to receive so much attacks, day after day, week after week, is certainly not only a soft spot, but I will say a weak spot. And I think it's going to grow. I think it's going on.
And also, there's its geographic proximity to the conflict zone in Syria, and that right there makes it quite vulnerable to
one
further
of the
attacks.
things that struck me about the language that he used when he says you have to give concrete examples, for me it illustrates two aspects of Erdogan's style of politics. The first is a sort of paranoid style. You're accusing us, show proof. And the second is the politics of division and the politics of conflict and confrontation. And we saw how he manipulated, in a sense, the conflict with the Kurds roughly about 18 months ago to win a decisive election after an indecisive one. Really torpedoing a peace process that was, by all appearances, very close to reaching a final deal. And he did that for really short-term political gain. In terms of how he's handled the Syria crisis also, it's always been a sort of short-term tactical approach and ignoring long-term aspects such as opening the frontier to allow extremists of all stripes into Syria, some of whom joined the Islamic State. Now, when he closed or when he became a little more strict about the frontier and went into Syria, this is when the Islamic State now claims an attack against Turkey. This isn't obviously to justify the attack in any way, but it seems to me like in a lot of ways Erdogan has been very short-sighted in terms of playing certain conflicts and divisions for short-term political gain without calculating how in the long term it could really have very high costs.
And yet, after that failed coup of last July, the crackdown continues. 380 business leaders arrested, among the targets your former employer, Zaman. The people saying that right now the state apparatus is overstretched.
Of course, I mean, especially the police department and the military has been completely eradicated. You know, we at least 90% of the anti-terror police officers have been sacked or imprisoned, or they are in prison. So we see clearly that there is a highly incompetent police officers who are in charge. At least we saw since 1 week they are still searching the identity of the attacker of the nightclub, Reina nightclub. So it is an issue. The state
it's easy to call. I mean, if it's one person escaping in stealth, it's easy to call it incompetent, right? Because here in Europe we've had our own security failings.
But there's a direct correlation between, you know, these purges, these massive purges,
right,
and the weakening security structure of Turkey. So I will also add that, I mean, the declaration of Erdogan is not surprising to me. Just a reminder, before the assassination of the Russian ambassador in Ankara, there was a large anti-Russian campaign within the pro-government media in Turkey. And after the assassination, they changed the tone radically. You know, they do always the same thing. After the attack, they say that we respect the lives of the secular people, the secular way of life, etc. But it's it's a short-sighted and reaction to
it won't last, is what you're saying.
Won't last, yeah.
All right, deeply divided Turkey, deeply divided Israel, as far-right sympathizers protested the conviction of a 20-year-old sergeant. He was found guilty of shooting dead a Palestinian assailant as he lay on the ground. The mood so bitter after the announcement by the military tribunal that prosecutors are now pursuing those who threatened the judge. They're also investigating threats against the Army Chief of Staff. Now, among those calling for a pardon of the soldier, Israel's Prime Minister himself in a Facebook message, Benjamin Netanyahu, siding with hardliners that include well, his own defense minister, Avigdor Lieberman. It's a strange situation, isn't it?
It is totally absurd. It's really a sign that we are governed by populists who can't understand when are the elections on and where aren't any elections on, because they are always in a flux of election on. And so Netanyahu acts like he was about to be elected tomorrow, and without a very populist stand. If the public feels for this soldier that he was in an impossible situation, then we must grace him. And I'm not prime minister anymore. I'm a contender to the prime minister. So it's a situation where the country really isn't governed. There isn't leadership at all. There are politicians on a survival mode. And this is what it feels also for the public.
And what will the, I mean, obviously, we're not there yet, right? Because there might be an appeal process. And, he hasn't been sentenced yet.
Yes.
But do you think the president would pardon him?
I think the entire political machine is going to press the president to grace him. But Reuven Rivlin, the president of the state, already proved a lot of times that he has an independent mind. So we're not sure about that. I do believe there will be some kind of deal within the judiciary system, and maybe they won't even need the president really accord. But this is a very, very tragic situation where democracy suddenly lose ground.
If I'm not mistaken, Ayalon was the previous defense minister, and he resigned in part because of a series of criticisms that the chiefs of staff had raised about these evolutions in Israeli society, dating back to this killing and the reactions to it. So in some ways, it raises this troubling alarm of divisions in the midst of Israeli society, civil-military relations, in a country where the army has always been a unifying institution. True. And has always been sort of seen as the bedrock of the country's security.
The real question up is which country? Which country is it? So if it's the military, the entire secular population that their children go to the army and then they are part of the country, or is it really more the settlers, the right wing, the religious kind? And in this kind, they say, okay, this kind of people will say, so he shot a terrorist. So okay, the guy was. It's not really that important. What is this trial about? It is not our country. Our country should really. The army should stand for the soldier. And it's very difficult to continue to pretend it's a unified country.
Amri Demir, your thoughts on this?
Well, I don't know if he will survive this, but Netanyahu has also another challenge after the UN resolution. Since today, Netanyahu has played a double act. I mean, politically.
The UN resolution condemning the settlements in the West Bank.
I mean, he was backing the settlement policy in Israel to appear as at least the right-wing party, but also he defended the two-state solution. So I think that he has to make a choice now, and maybe Trump will change the things, but Israel is...
I was going to say, does he have to make a choice? I'll put it to you, Aaron Zaleski, because with Donald Trump arriving, there's sure that the next time around there's such a vote, the U.S. will veto.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it's also, it bears of repeating that for a while, I mean, for years, there's been a strained relationship between Obama and Netanyahu. So my reaction to Obama's refusal to veto, it's more of a symbolic gesture than anything. He's the outgoing president. It's not really going to have any political impact, in my opinion. It was more just one last kind of. But again, yes, I think with Trump's stance, he would definitely veto it, and it would change.
The danger for Netanyahu of Trump is that he's always been very skillful of sort of playing his right wing off against Washington. So he says to Washington, well, there's nothing I can do about the settlements because look, I got to keep my right wing happy. Then he goes back to his right wing and he says, look, I can't go too far on the settlements because I got to keep Washington happy. If Washington isn't putting up any roadblocks at all regarding the settlements, but the problem is that Netanyahu at heart is always very risk averse, and he knows that there's no end game to increasing settlements because the only end game is either annexation which is the end of Israel as we know it, either because it becomes a one-state solution or an apartheid solution. So he's been happy with the status quo, and Trump in Washington means that he might not, it's like he's in this tug of war, and if one side just lets go of the rope, he's going to be pulled over to the other side.
Trump's nominee for ambassador in Israel is much more right-wing than Netanyahu himself. So we are in an absurd situation where Washington is going to be much more pro-settler than Netanyahu. And in this kind of situation, he's going to play time, and he's going to say it's a new president, I must visit in Washington and the Congress. I don't know how much time it does here.
Yeah, if he has time.
Yeah.
Twice in the past 4 days, police investigators have called on Netanyahu, staying 5 hours at his Jerusalem residence Thursday, part of a corruption probe, with a second suspect being questioned. The Likud leader in the past has easily shrugged off accusations of wrongdoing. Dov Alfon, will it be the same this time around?
Well, he's a survivor of this kind of thing. He's really a Teflon-coated leader. Still, this one looks really tough because right now we are only hearing about cigars and champagne. We're talking of thousands of dollars of cigars every week from gifts from businessmen. But to the public, it will look like you are inquiring a prime minister live on television just because he got some cigar boxes. It doesn't look very serious. But we can feel that underneath this first accusation, if you scratch it, there is a second accusation, and it is much more serious. So maybe this time he can't really get away completely.
What is that
from it.
more serious accusation?
Well, it will be cash. Since it's not gifts anymore, we are talking of some corruption that goes directly to bank account and cash suitcases. Either they have proofs of it, and then Netanyahu is finished. There's a previous prime minister of Israel imprisoned right now as we speak, or they don't have the smoking gun. And in this case, Netanyahu could continue till the end of his mandate.
Well,
It could be cigar boxes, but not filled with cigars.
But he doesn't seem like the gold-digging type. Was that money for him or money for his party?
Yes, well, it's really a complex personality, I must say, and you can't understand this. But the thing is that somehow in previous year he got used to this lavish lifestyle of businessmen, etc. He really likes posh hotels, and he likes cigars, and and his wife apparently likes champagne and very expensive ice cream. So with a government salary, even of the prime minister's salary, you can't really go to the Ritz and the Monaco every time. And so this is why he has these friends, and it's against the law.
All right, there's another man who's airing differences with his own security apparatus. He's called Donald Trump. We'll be talking about him when we come back. You're watching The World This Week.